Can you still hear and see me okay?
Perfectly, Tom.
Brilliant. All right, well, Barry, thanks for doing this. Really do appreciate it. I wanted to talk today predominantly about freedom, and I believe you're a really good person to talk to on the subject. But to help guide us through, I guess, I've got a few key words that I'd like to read out to you, and then we can go into those, or as I say, they can help guide us through later. So the words are, in no particular order, feeling, moments,
Hmm.
pain, inside out,
Hmm.
self-worth,
Hmm.
physical health, outside in,
Hmm.
abundance, contributions, materialism, and last but not least, regret.
Hmm.
Before we get too deep into that, Barry, could you to get us started, can you give us a sort of 60-second rundown of yourself, leading us up and into your beautiful book, which I finished, by the way, a truly inspiring and inspired and inspiring read. I felt really wonderful after reading it. But your book, First for Freedom, we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, if you could give us that 60-second sort of story of yourself leading us up into that book, that would be really really appreciated.
Yeah, I'm feeling to do that in reverse order. So I recently, well, 4 years ago, became a dad for the first time. So that's come relatively later in life, um, and continues to be an absolute revelation. Prior to that, predominantly single, my own thing, running a company, traveling around the world doing all sorts of projects, mainly for companies. And before that, employed, working in the fitness industry, first stage of my career. And then before that, traveling as a kid quite a lot because my dad in the Navy, living in Hong Kong. And before that, born in Norway, Norwegian mother, English father. Um, and yeah, and having sort of memories that span that whole time. And as you pointed to, freedom being the theme that's come back over and over again over that whole period until it seems to have called me to give it its full attention, which is what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I remember when I met you, probably the better part of 10 years ago, actually, how time flies. But one of our very first meetings, I remember you very clearly saying uh, something like, I have this inner desire, this inner urge, this inner need to be free. And I do remember that very, very clearly. It was quite profound at the time when you said it, and you've clearly changed a lot as a person since then. For example, you're a dad now, which anybody who has children knows that that'll change a person somewhat. But yeah, but way back then, when I met you, like I said, all those years ago, freedom, sorry, was always a theme within yourself. It seems. Was there a moment in your life where that you can recall where that became a thing, or was it in the book you go into it a little bit, but for the sake for the sake of those who may not have read the book, was there a moment that where that need to be free or feel free hit you, and kind of where were you in your life? What happened?
The, the feeling or the urge to be free has been present with me ever since I was a kid. Like even as a kid, I remember feeling like I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to Sunday school. I want to go and play. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. It's felt and it's been present ever since my earliest memory. Probably is that feeling. What shifted as an adult, and there was a moment, and it was literally a moment where the full realization came to me, and not that long ago, not that many years ago, that the the attempts and the efforts that I was making to be free um, were absolutely and utterly futile.
Okay.
That the freedom I was seeking was not and was never going to be available to me through the avenues I was seeking. And that I remember that moment, and it was a revelation. I hadn't seen it before. It was a shock. It was a relief. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's characterized by a complete feeling of, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know, but I know I don't know. And I know what I thought was the answer, or potentially when the answer, I knew for absolute certain. So it's sort of, it cut off in that moment um, a whole intention towards seeking something down particular avenues, which meant
Uh-huh.
I didn't still, which meant it didn't mean I still didn't go down those avenues. And I can talk about what I mean by those avenues, but I was
Yeah.
going down those avenues very clear and completely aware that there was nothing down the other end of them that was any different
Uh-huh.
from what I was experiencing now.
And you were aware about that when when you were going down them at the time, but you were kind of chasing your tail, so to speak, a little bit. You were.
Well, I'm certain this is not unique to me. I feel like it's a human condition that my my life was characterized by movement, and by movement I mean movement in every sense. Like I like to physically move, exercise, train. I like to travel. I like to meet different people. I like to work on different projects. So my life was characterized by lots of movement in every sense, lots of variety. And and
Do you
now I
think,
and now
if I may, Barry, was that moving? Do you think that was in part or one or the other moving towards something, or maybe running away from something?
oh it was absolutely both of those things.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um, I mean, there's a brilliant book called something like, why humans can't sit still, and I was characteristic of that is is when there seemed to be movement of any kind, I could tell myself or feel for a while that I didn't want anything in that moment. I could enjoy what I was experiencing, but the moment the movement ceased, I was then seeking more movement or seeking more things or more experiences. That
Uh-huh.
my life was
Okay.
characterized by the seeking of more,
Chasing,
yeah,
chasing.
chasing,
And this.
um, and the more being outside of me, like, yeah, that there were things outside of me that I could acquire, attain, arrive at, get, earn, win,
Yeah.
that that would provide, I don't know, that would provide something that would stop me thinking about it.
Yeah. Sure. It's almost like it's anti presence in a way, isn't it? It's seeking the next thing rather than the moment that we're currently in, which is everything. There's only ever the present moment. Uh, I believe you've read the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle or Tolle. Uh, so you said though that that changed. There was a moment in your life where that changed, and you kind of went 180. It sounds to me there was a lot of, one of the key words I mentioned was outside in. Would you say that, as in you were seeking external or chasing external whatever, stimulus, for example? But this moment of change, two questions for you. Was that a change to more inside out, and then so more being more centered within yourself, perhaps more present? But was it also? But what was the moment, and what was there something in particular that triggered that? Was it becoming a father that triggered that realization?
Um, no, it was well before that. It was fundamentally to do with my relationship at the time, actually, But it wasn't just about my relationship at that time. It was to do with all my relationships. It was that excuse the cough.
That's all right, no problem.
It, it
I've
was
got
the
one
complete
myself.
and it was the complete and absolute realization that what I felt that I was seeking, to be okay, to be free, to be safe, to be whole, to be whatever it was, um, could not be found in anyone else.
Hmm.
So whoever I was with, whatever, and it couldn't be found
So it wasn't
in.
things; it was some. You were looking for it in other people, in someone else.
Yeah, I think it was a combination. I think up to that point there was a combination of seeking something outside of myself to be okay, to be validated, and I can give you all sorts of examples of that. But I feel like that even more fundamental than that was to find an okayness and a freedom in being with the right person, having the right relationship, and having
Right.
something that I could settle. And yeah, those realizations came together that there
Did you
was
have an
no.
overwhelming? Sorry, did you have a? Did you ever get feelings of life's too short, but also there's a lot out there. You could be missing it if you, as you use the word you just used, settle for potentially the wrong person, potentially the right person. But was there the fear of missing out? Because I've had that in my life. I've had that sensation for sure, and I feel maybe that could be what you, in part, what you mean, or have
Well,
I completely misunderstood?
well, I wrote it about it in the book that my life was this perpetual seesaw, and it was most obvious in relationships, intimate relationships, because when I wasn't in a relationship, my whole focus was on getting in one, and when I was in one, my whole
Right.
focus was on what I was missing out on
What? Right. Yeah. Okay.
and what else could be going on. So I literally was running down one end of the seesaw, then back up the other one to get in one, get out one. But it wasn't just relationship, as in intimate relationship. It was with friends. It was with where I lived. It was things I was doing. Yeah, that feeling like I want to have as many experiences as I can. Um, but that feeling of wanting new and more experiences, just never ending.
Yeah.
There was never a cessation of that. There was never a point of going, well, I'm okay with this experience. Um, and also, quite a lot of those experiences, it was this experience isn't quite good enough, or this experience isn't enough.
Hmm.
Um,
It didn't quite fill the cup.
no, like eating at McDonald's.
Right.
You think you want it, you eat it, but afterwards you wish you hadn't. You don't really feel very good. Um, yeah, I call it like it's like empty
Almost. It's almost. It's
calories.
almost. Yeah. It's kind of like impulse control, almost, isn't it? It's that sort of short term gratification. Did it feel right or wrong to you at the time? It must have felt wrong in some part because it's led you on this quest to find your at least your freedom. Did it ever feel? Did there were probably moments where it felt right, but was there always this underlying feeling of this isn't right, sort of emotionally?
Um,
Well, while you think about the answer to that question,
mm,
if I may, this is what an obvious question from me to you would be: what does freedom mean to you? But um, I'd like to say what freedom means to me, and I felt this way for a while, and it really made me feel it after I read the book, which is freedom for me is feeling right, and that's the best way I can describe it. It's not feeling right in the moment or feeling right doing something in particular, or it's just I almost I could talk about it all day long, but at the same time, I kind of check out at that point. Freedom to me is feeling right. And another key point that I wrote down was, well, feeling is the first one, but the second one was moments. I Feeling right is, interestingly enough, something that came to me after moments. I learned some time ago that I used to call it happiness, feeling right. I call it feeling right now, but I used to call it happiness. And back when I was calling it happiness, I learned that I was chasing for a long time sort of this sensation of constant perpetual happiness. But then I realized it comes in moments, and that's the second key word, moments. And I thought, how do I take those? How do I take those moments and make them constant? And I'm still a student of this, but I've come to the conclusion that I don't think you can. I don't think that's how we're built, how it's meant to be. I think you might be able to extend them and you might be able to put yourself in positions to encourage the moments, but nevertheless, I think they're moments and they're fleeting. They're extremely short. They hit you unannounced. I'll give you an example. Um, it's actually what made me come up with the concept or realize that happiness, again, at the time I was calling it happiness. Happiness comes to you in fleeting moments. Was I was on a train once. I was visiting friends in a city abroad, and I was on the train coming back. And you'd think the happiness, the moments would come during the meeting, this meeting that I was having with my friends in this incredible city. We had a fantastic night, but the actual moment of happiness hit me coming back the day after on the train. And like I said, it was unannounced. I didn't plan on it. How can you plan for that? But I was sitting on the train and I was thinking about the night before, and it was a beautiful sunny morning. And it just hit me, I just had this rush of this moment of happiness and everything. And this is the moment where I realized that happiness was happening in moments and that the moments were fleeting. But that then led me to start calling it feeling right. There was an absolute moment there, a very short moment of just everything, of feeling right. Everything felt right. And I was at complete and inner peace. And so I kind of, again, I'm a student of this, but I guess my quest moving forward and has been for quite a while now is to not seek out, because I don't think, like I said, they come unannounced. You can't plan for them, but to put myself into positions where it makes it easier for those moments to come and then waiting for them. And I live in those little fleeting moments. I kind of accept that that's where I live. I mean, physically, of course, I live right here, right now, and every day. But spiritually, I suppose I live in those little moments. Does that? Well, first of all, does that make sense? Second of all, does that resonate with you in any way? Does that? Do you do you have a similar
Yeah,
do you have similar beliefs, similar feelings, similar moments?
resonates completely. I'll come back to feeling right. I feel like that's an area to give attention to. I can certainly comment on that. But what was sort of a new awareness that came when you were explaining that, and I've realized this is the more that I'm present, allowing myself to have the experience that's already here, then what happens then later, it's like, for me, I feel like I'm constantly rewriting my history because,
Hmm.
and I'm conscious of not going back there too much because I love this thing about, use your past as a library, not a home. There's always now. So, but the more that I'm present
Mm.
in the moment, then when I recollect those moments, there's nothing there but the joy and memory of that moment. Like there's nothing regretted. And that was another one of your words. And I feel like
Regret, yeah.
there's nothing to regret if I'm present in the moment that's now because everything that was available, and I experienced it. So how can there be
Yeah.
anything to regret? Um,
And it's
so I
an
like your,
illusion.
yeah. Um, I think this feeling right, that to me is everything. I'm, I
Mm.
wouldn't necessarily use the word right because by implication it means there's wrong, and I certainly don't see there being certainly no external rules or criteria for what's right and wrong. In that, I don't know what your feelings are. I mean, it's enough for me to figure out my feelings, but pretty much my whole life now is determined by what I feel. I'd say what I feel to be true, and I think probably your word is right, my way's true. They're probably not that really a distinction. It's like this feels where I should be. This feels what I should be doing. This feels in the general direction. Um, and one of the freedoms
You just
that
know.
you just know, and
Yeah.
I think I said to you the other day is the moment I start to try and explain that to myself, or I feel the need to justify it to somebody else, something's lost. Like
Yeah.
the feeling and knowing is first, and everything else is just something I'm making up. Um, and so then the word that comes in that's fundamental to me is trust.
Mhm. Yeah. Trust is huge to me. A huge,
Uh,
a big word at least.
yeah, and and trusting that feeling, I have it. I know that we all have it. To me, that's essentially where real freedom lies, in trusting ourselves and trusting the feeling and acting on that feeling. And like I'm doing something on Friday, and we're going to play this thing called, when you're a kid and you hide something, you say warmer, warmer as you
Yeah.
get
Yeah. Yeah.
close to
Yeah.
it. Like it's like I see life as this big game that that. Like warmer, warmer, we move more towards our feeling of what's true or what's right, and colder, colder, and I feel like that's why we have feelings. It's a real um, sense making device that knows what's right for us and knows what isn't right for us. Um, but to listen to that, we need to quieten down everything else because the world is so full of noise and
Yeah.
distraction and input that it can be very difficult to hear that. And my own view is that's where our mental health problems arise when we're listening to what isn't that and following things that aren't true or aren't right for us, or disregarding
Sure.
our feelings of what's right and true for us. And I've just to clarify, I've got no view of what's right for anybody else. I
Yeah.
mean, when I say I don't know, I
No,
really don't
it's
know.
yeah, it's
You
personal.
know, it's completely personal, completely subjective. Um,
And I believe that um, we really are talking about the same thing. The word you've chosen to describe it is truth. The word that I've chosen to describe it is is right. And you mentioned about to use the word. You mentioned to use the word right suggests that there's a wrong, and that leads me quite nicely into another key word, which is pain. So that would be the wrong. I can only speak for myself. I have my pain, my emotional pain. I personally believe that I believe in relativity. So I'm a big lover of relativity. To be happy, to have those moments, to even realize them, you must. It's relative. You must have had a bad moment. How would you realize it's a good moment if all you ever had is good moments? To know it's about a good moment, you must have had a bad moment. Um, so that I call pain, and that would be wrong, not right, to use my words. Um, based on that, I personally believe that everybody is carrying their pain, and that also, goes back to regret. I suppose a lot of pain comes, I think, from regret. But um, I think possibly certain people have. Everyone has their pain, so it's different pain, and I think some people might have it objectively worse than others, in that it's more intense and it's more constant. But I do believe that everybody has it in some form. So you don't have to divulge too many details because it's a very personal question. But I'm assuming that you have your pain, Barry. You have your emotional pain. Um, and I mean, well, can I ask that question? I mean, do you have, in whatever form, do you have your pain that you're carrying? So, for me, I almost describe it as like an unwanted housemate. You're living with this pain. You can't help it. He or she is there, and it's more about managing it than it is about not having it or having it. But please, I'd love to get your take on it.
Yeah, what came listening to you talk about pain, um, well, the other word that came to me was suffering.
Yeah,
So for a lot of my life, I spent a lot of time doing arduous physical activity, running, cycling, swimming, whatever it was. And there was a level of pain involved, as in my bodily sensations are going, well, stop this. This hurts. Stop.
yeah,
Um, but the joy and the feeling that came from consciously putting myself in under situations of relative, and I agree with you. I know what you mean about relativity was.
relativity. Yeah,
So my experience has been many places where I've experienced the most intense joy have been through putting myself in situations that maybe others would have thought involved a fair amount of pain. Um, I do
and
the,
do you
like
get?
this. I go on.
Does the pain come throughout, or does it come after, during with that? Typically,
If we were to talk about it in a more sort of fundamental sense, I mean, I spend a lot of time reading about this, researching it. I've got lots of experiences. So apparently, we're all wounded because our parents weren't perfect.
hmm
So as from children, we carry wounds of what we did or didn't receive that we needed when we were children. So we're carrying around a sort of latent pain. And then depending on what you believe, our parents are carrying pain from their parents and their
yeah,
parents. So there's and then if we come from a culture or a society where there's pain held particularly within that social group, there's this idea of this collective pain. So I do think there is collective pain. What I sense is we've all got the capacity and the opportunity in this lifetime to clear that pain. And one of the things I certainly want for my daughter is that what she doesn't get is receiving my unresolved pain through me projecting that, imparting that
right,
onto her. Like, I
right.
want that cycle of suffering and pain to end within me, or at least the degree that I can do it. And she might pick up her own pain and suffering. I'm not a perfect dad, but actually it's relatively minimal because I know we are not meant to live lives of pain and suffering. It's not inevitable, it's not required, and it's certainly not natural. I think the sort of pain that you get from having a cold shower or going for a run, because what I also know is I feel a bit like happiness is the way I feel about comfort,
hmm
right? If we privilege something too much, it stops becoming enjoyable or makes us happy. Like this whole thing about balance.
hmm
So I don't believe we're meant or it's natural to stay in a perpetual state of happiness. I think a lot of people try and keep themselves in perpetual states of fake happiness because it's more socially normalized to want to hang out with somebody who's being positive But if that positivity isn't authentic, and it's masking what me personally, I'm drawn to authenticity. And to me, authenticity means feeling what you're feeling and expressing those feelings and being as honest as you can about what you're
Sure.
feeling. Um, so yeah, and I'm not a stoic. I don't think it's useful to go and seek out unnecessary suffering. Um, the human experience will bring challenges, and inevitably it'll bring the ultimate challenge. But how we face those challenges, how we process those challenges, hopefully that comes through wisdom that's developed over time through having
Mhm.
experiences, listening, processing the experiences. But age and wisdom are not the same thing. I read the other day, like, if you're 77, but you've had 77 years of the same experience, you're still one.
Right. Okay.
It's what are we taking from our experiences?
Wisdom's got to
Um,
be earned. It does. You don't just acquire it through age.
yeah, it doesn't come just through getting older.
It's through getting old.
Like, um,
And I think it comes. It goes back to, we can call it the center of this conversation, freedom. If again, for me, feeling right, for you, truth. I think it goes back to that. Even in, again, relativity. Pain is good. Like, you use the example of the sports that you've done. It's pain, but it's a good pain because at the same time it still feels right. You might be at the pain end rather than at the moment. I'll call it the moment end, where everything aligns and you get that fleeting payoff of we'll call it freedom. But it feels right throughout. You know when you're on your path and you're on your purpose, don't you? Whereas I guess listening to what you've just said, there's also, and there's probably a negative, there's possibly a negative freedom as well, but there's certainly a negative pain where you're living, it doesn't feel right. So for me, what causes negative pain is, it goes back to regret. So I've got a few regrets in my life that cause negative pain, and again, I describe them as that unwanted housemate that I can't evict. That they live with me. I absolutely agree with you as well about, you get pain from your parents, and I even believe to some extent that you can get intergenerational pain as well. So, for
yeah,
example, the pain that was put on my parents, for example, by their parents, can almost skip a generation and be put onto me. But it's the the way I you, you can all you can get that, so you get it from your parents. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a moment. But you get pain from your parents. It's put onto you by your parents, but you also create your own, and that's through. So, you know, for the most part, children seem, unless something seriously wrong, children seem happier, shall we say, than adults. Not always, of course. I'm aware that there are certain circumstances where that's not the case, but generally speaking, if everything is for the most part done correctly, children seem to be happier than adults. And the older you get, the more life sort of takes its toll on you emotionally. And I believe that's in part because you've done nothing at a young age that you yet regret. You haven't done anything yet that you regret, and regret is where and regret is, I believe, is a huge cause for pain. So when I was younger, I was, at least in memory, I was happier, we'll call it that. But then as I get older and I do a few things, and it's all part of learning, I'd like to think that you could go through life without doing things that you regret, but I certainly haven't. There are a few things that I regret, and they now live with me, and they now cause me pain. Um, and it doesn't matter what I've done. It's relative to the individual, what they've done, and indeed the reaction to it and the emotional pain it causes you. But that with the pain that we receive unintentionally, let's hope, from our parents. Like I've described parenting as damage management. I know that in some way, I don't want to, but I know that in some way I'm going to install some issues into my daughters as much as I don't like to think I don't like to think that to be true. I know it's going to happen because I think in some way it's a bit unavoidable, or maybe I'm just really projecting my life experiences onto you and to everyone. I know they're different, but at the same time, they're going to be unique to me rather. But I'm also putting kind of the fundamentals of my journey onto everybody else, as in everybody else must be going through this as well. If that makes sense, or maybe not. Maybe there is some people live completely fundamentally differently to I do. They didn't have any. They don't have regrets. They didn't have pain put onto them by their parents, at least not pain that causes them any sort of long, prolonged emotional suffering. And maybe they live a much more you know a happier life. I don't know. I mean, I've gone off a little bit down the rabbit hole there. I'll let you pull me back on track. What do you think?
Um,
Or did I completely lose you?
yeah, no. I kind of get. I certainly, part of my awareness is, as we said, to not impart unresolved pain that I feel within my daughter, and time will tell whether. But I certainly don't see that as the my ultimate potential as my daughter's father and a mother. I see our collective opportunity to create conditions for her to be all that she is and to
Right.
discover all that she is and experience all that she is. Um, and I really feel like, other than the obvious, keeping our kids safe and not coming to any harm, but even that, you've got to be careful of that, because stopping your children have experiences where they're going to learn
Hmm.
something can be
Yeah.
detrimental to them. So I see. Um, I don't really understand regret, because if something's past, no matter what you think about it, it's it's done, so it can't be undone because that experience happened. And
Yeah.
in a very generalistic sense, we either do the right thing and we get the right result and we get a tick, or we do the wrong thing and don't get the right result and we get a cross, and then we learn from that experience, and that experience informs what we do next. I think the only thing
Yeah.
to regret is not learning and not taking the experience and doing something useful with it. So, and
Wow. Okay.
there's no human being on the planet that has made all the right decisions, had all the right outcomes, and probably, if that was possible, they'd be the worst narcissist that had ever lived, because the arrogance that came from never failing, never getting it wrong. I think my own feeling is,
I
who
imagine it would be a
determines,
horrible place to live,
yeah,
to
and
be
and
that
and who
person.
and who determines whether something's right or wrong, or good or bad? I mean, I've wrote about that yesterday. The problem I
Hmm.
see with school and society in general is it provides a script that we're meant to follow, that gives us an assessment of whether we're a good person or not. And I
Yeah.
always ask,
By whose judgment?
yeah, who determines that, based on what, according to who, and
Yeah.
and to what end? And this is what I mean about trust: is trust that comes from within each of us is irrefutable, because it comes from within each of us.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and on the whole thing, life's too short. How much energy am I going to invest in what I coulda, shoulda, might have done, and what coulda, shoulda, might have happened? Well, I didn't, and it is. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm kind of forward orientated sort of person, almost to a fault. Like, well, I'm here now. Now what? Not,
So
well, I shouldn't have
do
done
you
that.
live in very? I mean, I'm completely aware of that intellectually, but in as much as the past is the past, it's happened. What we should only take from that is what we've learned from it, and then have that alter our behavior moving forward. But do you spend any time living in regret at all,
No.
regardless of how? No, okay, okay. You have no emotional pain from past actions of any kind.
Well, I mean, the only real honest answer to that is, I don't know, but it's a bit like somebody asked me about, I can't remember the last time I felt fear.
Okay.
I just can't remember. So, if you're asking me what I feel about regret is I can't remember the feeling of regret. I've certainly got memories of situations where I know I should have gone that way and I didn't. I went that way, but then it's not
But
associated with
you don't.
regret.
Yeah, you're not carrying it with you as emotional baggage today.
No, no, I
No.
don't. I don't feel that. I mean, I might might be proven wrong, but I don't feel that.
Oh, I'm not trying. Yeah, I'm not trying to trip you up, Barry, and say that I disbelieve you or anything like that. I really don't. I'm not trying to do that at all. I mean, it's just it goes back to what I said earlier. I think that everyone has pain. I think we've established that it could be good pain, to use the sporting analogies. But if and I'm not living in misery or pain, but I do have negative pain in me, pain that's not helping me, and pain that doesn't feel right. And for me, there's some parenting stuff in there for sure. I don't spend too much time on that because I don't think you'll ever find the answer. Not a whole lot of value down to doing it, but I can say with absolute certainty there have been a few things I've done that I regret, and that's caused me pain. So that's why I sort of harp on about regret a little bit, really. Not that I believe that you're pretending that you don't
No,
you don't have pain through regret.
where what I know. For me, I know that nothing's present without there being a reason. So, well, I'm not saying I'm fully there yet with this, but I'm certainly a lot more effective at this. Is if something comes up for me, the first thing is try not to judge it as good or bad, right or wrong. If it's coming up, it's coming up. And then
Hmm.
the other
Let it
the
be.
thing, let it be. The other thing is to look at it absent of judgment.
Go on.
Well,
No,
it's a bit
I'm with you.
the,
I'm with you
the,
completely.
anal- the analogy I give is if a friend comes to see you and they're really upset and you've got that urge to comfort them, you've got the urge to help them, you've got the urge to give them a hug, you might do any of that. But pretty much in almost every situation, what they need is to be let be, to
Mm.
have what they're ever experiencing. And in some ways, comforting them, offering advice isn't serving them. It's just getting in the way. So that being with someone without interfering but being present and loving that's exactly how I think we should be with ourselves when things come up that we're not comfortable with, because I know that everything that comes within us, within me, is only
Yeah.
coming up to help me. Is only coming up to help me. Now I can choose to look at it or not, and sometimes I'm ready to look at it. Sometimes we're not ready to look at it. But if I can just let it be, not judge it, and let it be, and I believe that's the sort of
Get out of
cleansing process. That's the sort of
almost get
cleansing
out.
process.
Yeah, almost get out of its way. Same thing as saying let it be. Let it have it. Let it be. There's no better way of saying it.
Well, I'm going to make a link here because I started this conversation by saying I always needed to be in movement, like on a plane, on a train, going somewhere, doing something. Like mum used to laugh. But now I realise is I don't need to be moving all the time because life is moving all the time, and I'm part of life. So I've a much greater capacity to, I still like to go for a run or walk and, whatever, but I don't need to be moving because life is always moving. So I feel like these emotions and feelings that we're talking about are that which is in motion. So to some extent, it's paradoxical. The stiller I can become to
Uh-huh.
allow the movement, th th and like there's been loads of winds lately, haven't there? Really strong winds. And I'm like,
Mm.
well, isn't it wonderful the wind because it just blows through and clears everything? I think all these feelings we have, we're meant to just allow them to move through us. And then there's always another one. There's always another feeling. There's always, it's it's not like it ever ends. Is if I let this one go through, what's going to happen? There's not going to be another one. There's always another one.
Right.
And that's again,
We're
I feel part of freedom, experiencing freedom, not external ideas of freedom, but feeling, having the experience of freedom is the allowing of the movement of whatever wants to come through us to come through us. So we're freed up, literally freed up, unstuck. So the next thing can come through and the next thing can come through. And hopefully the next things coming through are new things. They're fresh things. They're different things rather than the habitual things that keep us stuck. Um, um, Tom, I'm going to go and pick up Sophia
No problem. To just to on that notion, Barry, we're almost an instrument of Mother Nature, of the
completely.
universe. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's playing us, which it absolutely should be doing, and we should allow it to play us. But sometimes we can get in the way. It was said to me beautifully once: "Life happens around you." I do like that saying. Life happens around you, and you almost need not to get in its way, I suppose. But I'll let you go, Barry. Thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really wonderful for me, and no word of a lie. I can't remember exactly at what point it was, but I actually had a moment during this call where I everything felt right. I really, truly did, and I hope that it was good for you as well. So thank you, and we'll hopefully speak to you soon.
Yeah, blessing, Tom. Lots of love to you. Bye for now.
Thanks, Barry. Bye for now. Cheers.